Today we're going to be talking about one of the most controversial things that have come out in the last month, and that is the new Gibson Les Paul Standard. Now, a lot of people have been booing this guitar. Ever since Gibson brought out that video, the comments section is just ridiculing it. And I'm going to tell you why I actually think it's kind of cool. And it's probably one of the first Gibsons I have wanted to own. So basically, the new LP Standard comes in two colors, blue and more blue. It comes with two new Burstbrucker Pro pickups, which we don't really know a lot about, 4 push-pull pots, plus a circuit board full of Dipswitches. And this is what has pissed people off. So many people have been going, we want a traditional Les Paul, we don't want push-pull pots, we don't like those things, why would you want single coil tones? Dipswitches, I don't want Dipswitches, I'm not going to pull Dipswitches out. All the complaints in the book, even from a lot of respected YouTubers. And I kind of understand why. People expect the Les Paul Standard to be what a 1959 Gibson Les Paul Standard was. One of the most iconic, famous guitars ever. But the thing is, it's 2018. It's not 1959, it's not 1960. No guitar companies that I'm aware of have their standard model exactly the same as it has been for 50 years. Maybe Rickenbacker is probably the closest one, and they're a tiny little factory with a niche market. Gretsch's standard models aren't the same as their famous models like the Chet Atkins and stuff. You know, everyone kind of innovates. The biggest problem Gibson have is that their quality control has suffered in the last few years. And with them going bankrupt, people thought they'd go back to a kind of more traditional roots. Now, can you get a Sunburst Les Paul with no push-pull pots, with Burstbrucker pickups? Yes. It's called a Les Paul Traditional. That's why it has that name. And of course, people like, well, that's a shitty model, blah, 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 blah. It's not really a shitty model. It's still got double A grade maple. And to me, if it's made well, it is going to be what you want if you want your classic Les Paul. Whereas the new Les Paul Standard has new features that a lot of guitars have, a lot of people have been adding to guitars. Even cheap companies have been adding coil splits because people want a versatile guitar, and not everyone just plays 70s hard rock anymore. So they want something that can get a few different sounds. And people will say, well, why not get an Ibanez or something? Well, people still like the Les Paul, the look of the Les Paul, the sound of the classic Les Paul, but just want a few extra things up their sleeve. Now, what do the Dipswitches do? If you haven't watched the video, I suggest you watch it, but pretty much it changes the wiring to common mods that people will use. So, for example, if you want to change from using the inner coils to the outer coils, it's actually on a push-pull pot. The outer coils are a thinner sound on the bridge and a thicker sound on the neck. The inner coils being closer together give a slightly different sound, and that's something you wire differently when you wire your coil taps in a pickup, but you get to choose it. And there's also all these other options to do with tone roll-offs and various things with these Dipswitches that are pretty much how you might want to wire your guitar permanently, but you don't have to. Now, are you going to change these during the gig? No, that's not really what they're made for. They're made for getting the sound of your guitar you want, before your gig, and that's how your guitar, like I said, like you would if you rewired it to, have a certain sound, have certain features you like from your wiring. Now, one thing is push-pull pots can break and can be annoying. So this depends on the quality. I don't know if these are custom-made ones, who makes them. If they're quality push-pull pots that don't break, they kind of stay where they are. They've got a nice kind of feel to them that's no worse than normal pots, then I don't see a problem in them. If you don't want to use them, just don't pull them. That's fine. Why would you be pulling on your pots anyway? As for the Dipswitches, like I said, quality control is a big issue. If these are solidly made, don't break, aren't too expensive to replace, then they're fine, especially if the pickups sound great and people don't want to replace them. If they do break, if the sound of the pickups isn't great, then of course this is a terrible product, because it doesn't have you can't modify it in the same way you would a classic Les Paul without ripping out all this circuit board stuff. And I'm not sure about the jack. If the jack's mounted to the circuit board, that's a terrible idea. You're going to break it easily. If it's separately you can just fix the wires and replace the jack easy enough. And it also brings me to the colors. Blue and bluer. I like these colors. They're beautiful. They're not a classic Les Paul. And that is really where I think most of the issue comes. If it was called a Les Paul Elite or a Les Paul Super Special or a Les Paul Extravaganza or anything else, and they had the Les Paul Standard as some bog standard Les Paul, or pretty much what the Les Paul Traditional is, just called that the Standard and made it as their flagship model, I don't think people would be complaining in the same way. But I don't think the company wants to be seen like that. They don't want to be seen as someone that just falls down to what they would have done back in the day and only traditionalists like their products. And I'm kind of for this, because if you want a traditional 50s Les Paul, just cough up and get a Gibson custom shop. They have them to exactly the specs they expect. And look, the quality control is the biggest issue, as I said. So if they're making decent guitars with that spec, you want to pay your extra money for a historic guitar, that's what you should do. That's what you would do with a Fender. You either get the Fender Original Series, which is kind of closely spec'd, or you get a custom shop model that is pretty much a 1-year thing. You don't see people buying a Fender Standard Strat and complaining that it's got a 2-point tremolo, that the machine heads aren't what they were in the 60s, that it has newer pickups that are voiced differently to traditional 50s pickups. You just don't see that. I know the changes in the Les Paul are a bit grander, but why should we have a 60s or 50s Les Paul as the standard? Doesn't make sense to me. But a lot of people really, really want what they have in their heads as a guitar company should do. And there's plenty of guitar companies that do this. They make guitars as people would if, you took the best thing about the vintage thing and made a new guitar, handmade it. There's plenty of companies. Look at that. The last thing is really the PRS comparison. People are saying PRS are doing it right. Les Paul are doing it wrong. Everyone's going to buy PRS. I don't know how many people have played that many PRSs, but there were plenty of PRSs that had complicated switching things, like the 513. Most of them had coil splits in them. A lot of PRSs had coil splits. That was part of like the modernizing of the tone. If anything, Gibson's taking from what PRS has done and kind of adding features to their guitars. Obviously, you can get much more varied PRSs, and people are going, they're cheaper. From what I can see, most of the PRS retail price are very similar for a similar guitar, as meaning a single cut dual humbucker guitar. Now, PRS's quality control has always been fairly good as far as I've heard. I haven't seen many cases of badly made PRSs with bad finishes, unlike I've seen on $6,000 Gibson guitars. So that is really what Gibson have to do. They can bring out these innovations, but they've got to work. They've got to build them well. And that's really the caveat here. I think people are going to start playing these, and if they are built well, they'll be fine. I have not seen any of these guitars at all, I don't think. I don't know when they will come into Australia. I mean, it'd be great if I could play one, but still. So, that's kind of my thing. I know a lot of people watching this would probably disagree with my views, and I'm happy to discuss it. Maybe it's just a name change. Maybe they insert a new Les Paul, call it the Standard, give this a name change, but I think they really wanted to show what they could do. And I'm not one that just likes technology as it is, really, to kind of make my point. It's not like I like the robot tuners idea. I thought that was stupid. Some of the other ideas, cool idea in practice, just didn't really work. I don't even like having tuners inside a guitar, as in like guitar tuners like they have in acoustics, because it's just something else to go wrong. But I don't know if a PCB that just changes the wiring is new age enough technology to start criticizing them for going with gimmicks. I just don't think that's a thing. But I'd love to hear from people. I'd love to hear from some luthiers and pickup companies and, you know, kind of people that wire electronics to see what they think. Because to me, someone who knows how to solder pickups, I don't see these things as kind of crazy. But for traditionalists, they may seem like crazy things. I mean, like out-of-phase pickups, Peter Green and Page have been doing that for over 30 years. Like, it's not some weird kind of trying to be modern thing. Heaps of people have out-of-phase switches in their pickups. I have one in my telly. So again, thanks for watching. If you want to watch any gear reviews or any other things, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want more of these kind of opinion pieces, I'm happy to go with them. I know that a lot of people don't necessarily want to hear YouTubers' opinions. They just want to see them play guitar and shut up. And if that's you, you probably are not watching up until this point. But, you know, I just thought, instead of just all my rants on YouTube, I'd, like in the comment section, I'd just make a little video seeing what I think are the pros of this design. So, thanks.